My name is Christina Henderson, and the University of Montana Entrepreneurship Club is pleased to welcome today Dr. Alex Philp and Dr. Joe Fanguy. Alex Philp, to my right, is a Montana businessman and entrepreneur. He's a former ranger in Glacier National Park, and he holds a Ph.D. in historical biogeography and geospatial systems from the University of Montana. In the last 10 years, Dr. Philp has founded 3 companies in Missoula. His first startup, GCS-Research, was launched in his basement as the commercialization of his graduate research at the UM. GCS eventually outgrew the basement and moved here to the Montana Technology Enterprise Center, also known as MonTEC. His companies have since graduated from MonTEC and are housed in a headquarters just off Higgins Avenue on the Hip Strip. A spin-off company, TerraEchos, landed a $1.5 million venture capitalist seed investment from Flywheel Ventures in January and won IBM's 2012 Beacon Award for Information Management Innovation. A second spin-off company, Adalos, develops high-security sensor technology and is part of S&K Technologies in Polson. Dr. Philp is now building interdisciplinary partnerships to teach UM students to solve business problems with big data analytics. Our second guest today, Dr. Joe Fanguy, also has much to teach us about business opportunities born from university research. Dr. Fanguy has been Director of Technology Transfer at the University of Montana since fall of 2009, where he serves as a key resource for intellectual property and commercialization. Dr. Fanguy has also served as president of MonTEC for the past year. He holds a Ph.D. in biophysical chemistry from Mississippi State University, where he was named Graduate Student of the Year, and worked in applied research, licensing, and ultimately served as Assistant Director of Commercialization. A native of South Louisiana, Dr. Fanguy has said the only concerns he had about moving to Big Sky Country were snow and bears. In the last 3 years, under Dr. Fanguy's leadership, the UM Tech Transfer Office has captured 75 new inventions, filed 55 new patent applications, and brought in more than $8.5 million in research contracts and private sales from intellectual property developed at the University of Montana. Both Dr. Philp and Dr. Fanguy work at the intersection of multiple disciplines, connect the knowledge of the academy to the needs of the marketplace, and are major players in Montana's growing entrepreneurial community. Please help me welcome Alex Philp and Joe Fanguy.
Waiting on me.
Huh?
Waiting on me.
I don't know. Who goes next?
If you would be willing to just expand on that introduction, maybe we'll have Dr. Philp go first and Dr. Fanguy go second, but just tell us more about what you have done and are currently doing.
Sure. So first of all, it's a real pleasure to be here, and it's a nice honor to be presenting with Joe. The background is, as was mentioned, is I grew up in Redmond, Washington, and I got out to Montana when I was 19. I spent 5 years in the Park Service, and then I worked for the Forest Service for a few years on the Rocky Mountain front. And my background as an undergrad was history, ancient Greek history, and ancient Greek philosophy. So I spent a lot of time worrying about the 5th and the 2nd century BC Athens. I was always someone who was interested in what was going on across campus. My interest took me everywhere. And at a certain point, after a couple of years living in Shoto, I knew that I wanted to go back to grad school and get some degrees. I was interested in range management, ecology, landscape ecology, and so on and so forth, with an interest in history. So I showed up at U of M, and I plowed through my Master's of Interdisciplinary Studies, which was a culmination of work in History Department, the Geography Department, and the School of Forestry. And then that led right into the doctoral program in forestry. And then when the university finally offered an interdisciplinary PhD, I shifted my degree into that. That was about 1997. In 1998, I got offered a job to work for a NASA-funded program at the University of Montana to basically do what is now known as geospatial information technology. At the time, there was a pretty interesting convergence between the World Wide Web and a geographic information system. And I was able to work with a really talented group of people to put a team together to drive that process for about 4 years. I became very entrepreneurial while I was at the University of Montana. And again, we put together an interdisciplinary team, and I want to use that term versus multidisciplinary. They're very different. I would encourage you to think interdisciplinarily versus multidisciplinarily, but that's me. And by the time we were 2001, 2002, we were doing amazing things at the university as a team. We were breaking a lot of rules. We didn't believe in convention. We built the first university website in our spare time. We were building websites as fast as we could do them. We got millions of dollars in federal grant money because if you're doing the right thing and have passion, you'd be amazed what you can earn and win. And secondarily, I started working with the private sector. There's a lot of companies that are in the remote sensing, geospatial, or GIS, or location-based services industries. This is more common today than it was 10 years ago in terms of knowledge. But companies like Orb Image, companies like GeoEye or Space Imaging, and we went out to the private sector and we started asking them to collaborate and participate with us in our project and our mission. And so we accumulated about $800,000 of in-kind donations and software services, and it just kept building and building. Ironically and interestingly, I did have a faculty member at the University of Montana. Remember, I was ABD. I was not completing my doctorate. I was very excited, working all the time. Say that I was too entrepreneurial and I belonged in the private sector. And that was an interesting meeting, to say the least. And about 5 months later, you know, I left the university and I did something that was either the smartest thing I've ever done or the dumbest thing I've ever done. And I honestly some days wonder what that is. But I decided to start GCS-Research. And I did. And I started in my basement, and I just brutally, full force, cold called, you know, over 2,000 contacts I had that I had made to get my first job in terms of GIS services. And that was for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. One thing's led to another. The real quick story is GCS first was in the basement, and then it was in a radon den across town. That was what we affectionately called it. And then we did move into MonTEC. And by the time we left, we started with one office, 113. And by the time we left here, we were renting half the building. I think our rent was up to $55,000 a year. And it was ridiculous. And we were doing things in here that weren't supposed to happen. It was time for us to move on and graduate. And we were incubated, and it was time to see if we could survive outside the incubator. So I've had many, many memories of this place. In fact, we donated that image on the wall right there. That was the highest resolution commercial image ever taken of the University of Montana, straight from the QuickBird 1 satellite. We helped put together that topographic map at the end there, because I don't think you can understand a place unless you can map it. You'll get the emphasis. I'm kind of a geographer. And our first board meetings were in here. Our first customer meetings were in here. The benefits of this place were amazing in terms of being able to get some credibility, because and so a lot of good memories about MonTEC. We moved. By 2005, 2006, we created the second company based on licensing deals with the United States Navy, based on a very, very sophisticated sensor system, which has now become the Delos or Delos company, which is currently owned by the S&K Technologies of the Confederated States Kootenai. By June 15 of 2009, they bought 51% of that company. So that was a good day. We continued to drive that. And then, as was said in the nice introduction, we decided to create a third company, and we launched that company in January of 2012, and that company is now called TerraEchos. That is a classic high-tech venture capital-based startup in Missoula, living off our seed round. We're sprinting right now to try to get our product evolved, continue to grow our sales, et cetera, et cetera. So I wear a lot of hats. I'm either director of this or founder of that or whatever. But when I get into more detail here in a minute, I'll talk to you that it's not about me and it's not about but and I know this sounds a little weird, but to me, entrepreneurialism is about team. and it is about a we proposition. It's not an I proposition. I've only been able to do what I can based on the quality of the partners and the employees and the staff that I've had the good fortune of working with. So that's kind of an overview of the last 10 years. It's been a fast and furious 10 years. In fact, about a month ago, I started a 4th company. I like starting things. I like getting ideas off the ground. And I'd be happy to share my lessons learned, and I'd also be happy later to share what I know about this phenomena of so-called big data, and what I'm doing about that in our private sector, what I'm doing about it personally as an IBM champion, and also what I'm doing with the University of Montana. I'll end on this. Since Joe showed up, it's been a breath of fresh air. I'm really, really interested in working with the university again. I wasn't so much so. I really support the vision of the new president. I think his global leadership initiative is good, President Engstrom. So I have been donating and contributing and doing scholarships and lecturing and doing what I can to really close that gap, if you will, between these high-tech startup companies, not only my own, but the other ones that are in Missoula, and the university. I think that gap has to be closed. I want it seamless. I want this kind of thing that's happening here. I think it's a no-brainer. And if I was you folks sitting around this table today, either you have experience starting companies or you're interested in new skills, I think it is the best time I've ever seen in 24 years of being in Montana to be an entrepreneur. It is exploding right now in this state. Whether it's Bozeman or Missoula or a half dozen other towns in this state, it is a very, very exciting time to be an entrepreneur, to be entrepreneurial. I see really some stars aligning right now across a variety of sectors. And my goal is to make Missoula, Montana be known internationally as a center for information technology innovation. I want us on the map in a big, big way, and I'm not going to stop until that happens. So thanks. Long-winded introduction, sorry.
Great.
I don't know how much you want.
That was perfect.
Okay.
You want me to speak now?
Please.
Well, thanks again for the opportunity, Ivy, to be here. The introduction was nice. It's interesting to hear about that bear and snow comment. My family and I came about 3 years ago, and it's funny how perspective changes quickly because I don't really think much about either one of those two things anymore. After being here for a few winters, my job at the university, I think, is one of the more exciting jobs. My background's in chemistry, and as a graduate student, I was involved in a commercialization project. We developed some pharmaceutical screening device to aid in the screening of new pharmaceuticals. And so I had the opportunity to work with a company out of Europe to try and commercialize that, and we filed some patents. And so that sort of exposed me to this intersection between higher education and research and the real world or the private sector. And so when I finished my doctorate, I took sort of a non-traditional path, and rather than continuing on with chemistry, I joined the Office of Research and filled the role as sort of a business development officer. And the skill set that I had was I understood the technical aspects of things, but then I also had sort of an inclination toward the business side and how to monetize on those things. And so I did that for a number of years, and at a fast forward, I came to the University of Montana for a couple of reasons. Number one, UM is continuing to show that it does have clear value in its research engine here, both from an economic development standpoint, from an educational standpoint, and from a commercialization standpoint. And the other reason I came was because of the people here. I continue to learn every day that just to live in this state, you have to be entrepreneurial, I think, and that speaks to ranching and things of that nature, and what Alex is doing. And so when you think about needing sort of a team or skill sets and sort of a culture and spirit, this is a great place where people sort of come together to get things done. And so I felt that having a strong research enterprise and the right types of people here, this is a great place for us to do things like commercialized research. So I just want to speak quickly to what that means for everyone. I always sort of touch on 5 points. When we think about research coming to the University of Montana, currently that number is between $60 and $70 million per year. And how we get those dollars is our faculty compete with universities around the country through a granting process. So it could be NIH dollars or NSF dollars. And so that money comes to U of M. And so point number one is that creates jobs in our community. So about 55 to 60% of those funds go directly towards someone's salary. Could be technicians, could be administrative support, whatnot. So there's a direct return economically. Second thing, it gives a lot of student opportunities, so that funds about 200 or so assistantships. So this is training the next generation of people like Alex or those that particularly are in the areas of the sciences. So it's educational component. It also creates intellectual property. So when you think about big industry, they're not as creative as maybe they once were. And so when you think about research, it's sort of the front end. It's the exploratory process. You're not driven by profit in a corporate sense, and so there's more opportunity to explore, and so that leads to creativity, and the way we capture that is in intellectual property. Under federal legislation, 30 years ago, the general taxpayer said, so what's my return on that research? And so that was when offices that I run now sort of came into official being. And so the goal of that is to generate products from that intellectual property. And so there's some examples of that we could talk about. And then the fifth point is that sometimes the research generates ideas that are so early stage they're not quite ready for corporate America, so to speak. And so that presents opportunities for new companies. Alex serves as an example. Rivertop Renewables is another example that we talk about. And so anyway, so just to touch on an example of those 5 points, I mentioned Rivertop Renewables. First point is Don Kiley was a faculty member. He earned research dollars competitively for many, many years. He built up a research program. He educated a lot of students. And then over the course of that, he developed a proprietary process for producing what's called glucaric acid. And 10 years ago, that probably wasn't on many people's radars, but as phosphates are phased out of things like detergents and road salts, all of a sudden there's a need for replacement. Citrates don't quite work. And so the university had the intellectual property behind this proprietary and cost-effective process. And so a company was started about 4 years ago called Rivertop. And so Rivertop now represents 20-plus employees, many of them making 3 times the average Montana wage. They are on the verge of being a big player in the renewable chemical industry. If you're out on the roads this winter and you see any salt poured on the roads, that's coming from Rivertop. They have that contract, and their big claim to fame will be in the detergent market. And so I use that example to just talk about how it takes years of research to get to the point where you have products that can be produced. But we're starting to see here in Montana, not just here but in Bozeman, where we're seeing examples where now we're being able to create jobs for our students. So of those 20-plus jobs, of Alex's jobs, these are jobs that are now being created from within our own sort of ecosystem. And so that's sort of the important tie back when we think about the legislative session that's coming up. You know, when we talk about return on investment, it really is about creating jobs for Montanans, creating jobs for students that come here and get an education. So that's sort of my job, what I came to Montana for. And then as with everything, you're thrown into new situations and things that you don't quite expect. And I'll say that MonTEC was that for me. I was appointed to the board of directors. It's a separate 501c3 from the university. And last year, the managing agent, so to speak, went out of business. This was the Missoula Area Economic Development Corporation. And so the university stepped in a leadership capacity, and we sort of assumed responsibility. So just a quick and dirty of what the past year has been like. It's been interesting. We've changed the business model. Financially, we're back on good standing. We just finished a $3.5 million construction project to basically change our business model. And we now have, in collaboration with my office on campus, with the business school, with the Missoula Economic Partnership, with the Entrepreneurship Club, we're starting to see a process come together. And so when we think about early stage research, and I hear all of you guys talking about great ideas, and you pointed out there's A and C, and then what does B look like? And so now we're at the point where we're starting to see a process come together to help bring people through that sort of minefield of exploring different opportunities. And so it's really exciting to me to be a part of this because of the great people that exist here in Missoula and in Montana. And the last point I'll make is that of all this, my real passion ties back to students, which is why I'm involved with this club. Because when I was a chemistry student And I was interested in this type of thing. There was nowhere to go, and there was no one outside of the business school that took any interest in, non-traditional type students. And so at the end of the day, I feel that we've made great progress in growing our intellectual property base, growing this incubator. But at the end of the day, if I look forward, 3 to 5 years, my real goal is to better integrate students into that process. And we have a number of internship programs, but I think the ultimate goal is what you're talking about, which is starting your own companies and making sure that we are doing our best to provide assistance, mentorship, guidance along that process. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's great.
Thank you. I'm wondering, Dr. Philp, if you could talk about a couple things that you mentioned earlier, the lessons that you've learned that might be helpful to students, and also your big data project.
Yeah, there's, I heard, from people coming here that there's really two interests, and I think I'll split my time between what I can offer in terms of this notion of entrepreneurialism and what we're doing in big data. So I've already mentioned that the longer I am involved in creating businesses or starting businesses with partners and various investors and various types, that I do believe it's about the quality of the people that you go into business with. I think there's a big myth that this is all about rugged individualism. I do believe that we are prospecting out here in Montana. I think that's not an accidental metaphor. But at the same time, I pick your team and pick your team wisely. It's nice to do it alone, but it gets tiring, it's exhausting, and you will be beat down into oblivion depending on your model very, very quickly. So you've got to have people that are seriously dedicated that you're going to work with, and you're going to put your back to back, and you're going to fight your way out of the corner over and over again. If there's one common denominator for the companies I've started or been involved in is we're tenacious, we never give up, and it's a tremendous amount of work. It sounds nice and romantic, but it is a we thing. Number two, you better be prepared to take some risk. There's a big debate. I don't spend a lot of time studying entrepreneurialism or reading books about I don't have any time for it. I don't really care, to tell you the truth. But you do need to be prepared, depending on your family situation, your economic situation, to take some risk. Somehow, some way, depending on your model, if it's completely bootstrapped, which I did, everything we started was bootstrapped. We had, it was just literally, income went down, money went up in terms of outflow, and there was a lot of risk. So quantify the risk to the best you can, set a plan. You don't have to, white knuckle it like I did. Give yourself 2 to 3 years and make sure you follow a budget, lay out a budget. I don't care if you're starting a better way of doing precision agriculture, which I love, or you're going to start a new innovative construction company or a better chemistry company. I don't care, but quantify your risk and be prepared depending on your family to do it. I see a lot of Montanans who have got great ideas, both at the university and outside the university, who basically are prohibited from starting that company because of the essential, that financial impact that's going to have. That's a major barrier to getting more businesses created. And look at the numbers. I mean, we need more businesses starting because the way it is not everybody's going to be incredibly successful in terms of revenue or employees or profitability. But the more we have started, the chances are the more that will be sustained and will make that 5 years. We'll get to that 10 years. So quantify your risk a little bit. Number two, and this is something that's been new for me, is capital and obtaining capital. Our first company, again, was bootstrapped, and we basically grew it very slowly over time by winning business and building that client base. Brute force business. And we were in the GIS services business, so I went to what I knew. I went to USGS, U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Eventually we got into Army, Navy, Air Force contracts. And if it wasn't for MonTEC and the PTAC, I wouldn't have been able to even get that first contract because I didn't even know what paperwork I needed to fill out. I was completely naive on how difficult it is to go to do business with the federal government. So, but we brewed it when we finally got there. The second company, we also started bootstrapped. We got some grants, and then ultimately we brought in federal contracts and we brought in tribal funds. And I'm talking investment from the Confederated Settlers Kootenai. I'll say it again, I've said it many times, one of the smartest things I did was look around within a 300-mile radius of Missoula, understanding I lived in the hinterland and basically the wilderness, and it wasn't the center of the universe for everybody on the planet. And I said, what assets are around me that I can work with? The first was Pacific Northwest National Lab, the second was the Idaho National Lab, and the third was this was the Native American nation of the affiliated Confederated States of Kootenai. And I went up there and I met their business leaders. I met guys like Larry Hall. I met guys like Tom Acevedo. These are multi-million-dollar, multi-year, excellent companies that are just north of us, 40, 50 miles, that most people don't even know about. It's like a whole different universe, one of 7 independent nations. So we brought in some tribal capital and they made a big investment. And if you look in the papers and read what's going on, it's SKT that just won $1 billion Air Force contract. It's S&K Aerospace that just won a $60 million Air Force contract. They just won a $20 million Army contract. So, you know, that's huge. You think they need people? I understand you all want to create your own companies, but it's a good model. You should check it out. And we partnered with them heavy duty. So partnership. I can't stress enough partnership. I see in Montana a lot of people so freaked out about working together that they don't ever work together, and because, oh my God, I have an idea and I can't share it with you and I'm a super genius. No one's that smart and no one has that great of an idea. I guarantee you it doesn't work that way. So learn to partner, be careful, but I think partnerships are smart. And partner with people that are solid and are trustworthy and have a good reputation. Don't get in bed with charlatans, and there are a lot of them. And part of being a mentor to small businesses, I can tell you in 1 hour, you know, the 50 organizations to avoid and the 50 organizations to work with. And that'll save you a ton of time and energy. Hold on to your vision. The vision is key. What we're looking for, what businesses are looking for, is the best possible idea you can have. And I know that sounds obvious, but don't let go of your vision. Everybody will beat you down. It's the wrong idea, the wrong thought, the wrong this, wrong that. But just hold on to it and try to articulate it as best you can and be strong in holding on to it. Never let go. Other thing is, and I don't know what's going on really in terms of business plan and business plan competition and the different departments and all this other stuff. I'll talk about that in a minute. But what I've been doing lately in terms of business plan formation is 20 slides max, 10 minimum. These are not dissertations. My first business plan was 185 pages. I wrote a lot, you know, and I did it half in Greek, and it was really pretty, and no one read it, and I didn't get a single dime. The last time we raised $1.5 million, it took us, you know, $1 million took us 8 days, and it was 5 slides. And it's just freaky, and I still don't understand how it happened, and we'll see what happens. The verdict is out. But I'm telling you, don't go kill yourself on this business plan thing. I mean, get your pro forma down. Hopefully someone's telling you it's going to change the minute you put a shingle out. It's a work in progress. Do the best you can to quantify your risk. Do the best to understand what you're going to sell, right? I'm selling time, I'm selling something, you know, and stay away from the jargon as best you can. And then ultimately, I'm convinced that I and my partners have been successful in large part due to our passion. Again, just incredible amount of hard work, and the one thing I'm known for, and I'm known for a lot of things, not all good either, but at the end of the day is I tend to be passionate about what I do. And I heard in comments earlier from a lot of you that what's attracting to you to being an entrepreneur is the ability to be your own boss, to be able to, you know, to lead the way. And in many ways that's true. I mean, I carved out a little niche. It's not a little pretty. It's not that pretty. I look over the, you know, I look at a gas station all day, and beyond that, there's the mountains up there. But I'll tell you what, I don't care if we've made 20 or 30 million bucks, and you know, whatever we've done. What I enjoy the most at the end of the day, within reason, is I have an office that's mine. We can control our destiny in many ways. I can go in there every day and innovate. I can work with some incredible people. And I can limit the amount of frustrations and distractions that keep me and my companies or my partners from being successful. It doesn't mean we don't have taskmasters. I mean, I answer to banks, I answer to investors, I answer to boards, I answer to customers, the most important thing in the world. And the one thing I've done a long time ago, and I learned everything about entrepreneurialism from this job, is I was a bellman at a hotel. I made money after I got out of Seattle University with my advanced degrees in ancient Greek history and ancient Greek philosophy. I was completely unemployable. I applied everywhere, you know, Microsoft exploding, and I worked as a bellman. And I learned the value of service, customer service. So I had to live on tips, and when I lived on tips, if I knew what I was doing and I really was empathetic with the customer. So understand your customer. The best thing you can do in starting your company, I don't care what industry it is, from, you know, SAIC all the way down, is get out there, get into play, and and in the small companies that I've invested in as an angel, quietly, I try to encourage that entrepreneur to get started, get going, be in play. You know, the more you think about it, the less you're not in play. So get out there, get to know your customers, and do those things. And then finally, final point, I guess, on terms of me and my whatever I'm providing in terms of entrepreneurialism, is this. Again, I do believe in interdisciplinary approaches. So when I hire people, and we hired a person last week, we're going to hire another one this week, hopefully. At the end of the day, is I'm looking for, of course, that quality work ethic. One of the greatest possible things you have going for you, most of you in here in this room, is you're Montanans, or you have enough Montana in you that you are a nationally precious commodity. In that you're not prima donnas, you don't have these wild expectations, and at the end of the day, that's why every company and their mother comes to the School of Business and tries to hire them. So we have this incredible brain drain out of Montana. You know, that's happened for 100 years. We've exported our coal and our diamonds and our gold and our copper. We've also exported the most precious commodity, and that's brain stems. So at the end of the day, we got to stop that. Second of all, interdisciplinary approaches. So I look for people that have that work ethic. Can't train it, can't teach it, never going to happen. And then I call it, the personal triangle. Every employee has to have, a culmination of skill sets. I'm not suggesting you have to be an excellent attorney and an excellent accountant and have all this world-class stuff, but it's nice if you can come with a package. And if I'm a programmer, I can also speak intelligently and write an English sentence. If I'm an accountant, I understand a little bit about programming. And if I'm a communications director, I know enough about what's going on from programming and computer science that I can have an interdisciplinary team. It's a team, and that's what I'm looking for. So I ask, can you communicate well in written oral form? Yes or no. I ask for a writing sample, even if you're a programmer. The days of that are over in terms of having your own little comfort zone and being walled off. You've got to have multiple facets. And by the way, you're going to be negotiating all the time with your employer for where you are, where you're going. And what we want, and what I'm trying to inculcate in our staff, is a commitment to innovation. We fund it. We spend a very large % of our revenue every year on innovating more. And again, those are some of the basic things there. I could stop at that point and let Joe talk a little bit about something and then come back to the big data so I don't drone on here endlessly. Does that sound reasonable?
That'd be great. I'm wondering, Joe, if you could lay out more about MonTEC and the resources available for business incubation? Sure.
So I'll sort of talk in a process sense, and the resources I'll talk about is sort of again, a collaborative effort among a number of organizations. I think it's true no matter what you do, as Alex talked about, partnership to make sure you leverage everyone's skill sets and resources. So I'll sort of go through sort of the process that I feel is coming together. The first is that we work under sort of an advisory board capacity. So when you think about the diversity of whether it's businesses here or research and technology on campus, I mean, it spans anything from software to pharmaceuticals to nutraceuticals to devices, and so there's a breadth of expertise needed there. So the sort of the first cut for us is sort of a go, no-go through a resource of advisors, and most of those are actually outside of the university context, so we're not talking from an academic perspective, but more from a business or venture perspective. For those sort of ideas that sort of make the cut for, there's some viability here. We piloted this year the first time an executive in residence program. Individual named Ed Weatherby, who has some venture experience, is filling that role currently. And basically speaking to Alex's point, the role there of that executive in residence position is to put together sort of a business model. And I just think of that simplistically as, I mean, how are you going to make money off of whatever your idea is? And more specifically, what need are you meeting out there? I mean, it's interesting from a university perspective. I mean, typically researchers think the opposite direction. They're thinking forward about, exploring new areas of research. But when you think of a customer, there's some unmet need out there, and you need to have a competitive advantage over who else is offering that solution. And so that speaks to business models. So that executive in residence piece is sort of the second tier there, sort of putting together, is there a model? The third step in the sort of process is through the Kauffman Foundation, which is sort of an international leader in entrepreneurship out of Kansas City. And so basically we have a program. It's a little bit similar to what the Entrepreneurship Club will have in the spring, but a little bit more complexity to it. It basically, over the course of a 10-week process, is designed to go from concept to business plan. And the model for each of those sessions is built around sort of an expert in that particular field. So if that week is finance, it'd be someone that's an expert in finance. We had for IP, we had someone that came in from Denver, attorney that came in and spoke about intellectual property. So each week focuses around a guest speaker, then sort of some discussion. I mean, there were 9 companies that participated in the program this fall. And so, I mean, if you think about, sitting across the table and talking about finance, if you're doing big data and someone else is doing commodity chemicals, you really learn how to communicate in different fields. It's always easy to get in your field and talk, specific to people that you know. But when you think about raising money and hiring people, I mean, it's a much broader perspective. So that program also has sort of a business coaching aspect to it. So first there's advisory board, then there's executive in residence, then there's this fast track Kauffman program. And then the next stage, really the hope is at that point that most folks are at least at the point of being ready to start talking about raising money. And that can mean a lot of different things. I mean, Alex talked a lot about grants, and there's a lot of grants out there at multiple levels to help get companies off the ground. There's, the whole tier of friends and family, angels, and on up. But really our key partner there is the Missoula Economic Partnership. And so for those of you that don't follow economic development in our community, Alex was a spearhead to get the Missoula Economic Partnership off the ground within the past 18 months or so. A guy named James Grunke runs that operation, and basically they serve as the city's hub for economic development. And so they really serve as the resource for our process and program in terms of fundraising. And James serves on our board of directors, so that's sort of the direct connection with MonTEC. And then the last piece is really the incubation process. I mean, Alex is a great story of success as to how someone starts in their garage and ends up here and then moves on. But really, I don't like to make it about space. I mean, I think it's about connections and it's about people. And so here at this facility, in addition to providing programs and services, one of the things that we're really positioning ourselves in Western Montana and beyond is to provide access to the U of M. So we're looking for companies that doesn't necessarily have to be research-based, but is looking for some sort of connection to the university. We believe that's a huge asset, no matter if you need students, if you need resources, equipment, interns, employees. So really MonTEC sees itself as a partner with the university. And so basically those 5 things are put in place to sort of give someone introductory guidance to the fact of whether or not there's some viability to what their idea is, all the way to having sort of some mentorships and formal programs to help build out that model, to really helping that company sort of move and transition from maybe a 1 or 2 person outfit onto a budding company.
That's awesome. Okay, I think I should talk a little bit about big data as just an area of interest and something that some of my companies are involved in. Essentially, this is, in many ways, people want to know, what is it? What is it? Hype? Is it this or that? And in many ways, I think, you're dealing with, one way that many people comment about it is we talk about 3 primary dimensions of the big data problem. And this is helpful, at least to putting some context to this. So you'll hear often, and if you Google my name, and you'll see a lot of webinars I'm doing, there's an ungodly amount of stuff out there being driven by a whole bunch of commentators and writers and bloggers and obviously the largest corporations in the world in terms of IT. But clearly there's a dimension of what we understand to be big data that's dealing with the volume of information. If you guys haven't figured out by now, we're in an information or a data explosion. in terms of the amount of information we're creating. Something like 80% of all the information in the world has been created in the last 2.5 years. You can see these statistics all the time. It's endless. It's compounding daily. So along with the megatrend of the cloud, now you have a megatrend of what big data is. But you definitely have the volume dimension. Another dimension, of course, is that you got a lot of different types of data now. So we have a variety problem. A lot of our data historically has been what we would consider structured, right? It's stored in a database. It has a nice format to it. You know, we haven't been dealing with petabytes of video every hour, audio. You know, we live in a total digital storm. So we have a variety issue of structured, unstructured. The data is continuous, it's discrete. We're having to handle lots of different data. A lot of it coming particularly from the explosion of the other mega trend, which is mobile computing and mobile application development and that. So the big ones I see, of course, is cloud, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, modeling as a service, security as a service, the whole 9 yards. Of the explosion of software as a service, combined with the whole notion of analytics and the whole idea of extracting more intelligence from our information, and then finally this mobile compute phenomena where it's just amazing what we're seeing. So you got volumetric, you have variety, and then of course velocity. Now I happen to be in a space where we are really trying to understand the velocity problem of a lot of data moving very quickly that's unstructured. So it's a perfect storm of a lot of data that's unstructured, it's audio, and it's moving very quickly, and we need to analyze it in real time at fiber optic speeds of 10 to 1 gigabit Ethernet speeds in the middle of a desert or wherever. So that's how we stumbled on the whole problem, is down at the Idaho National Lab, we were sitting there with our sensor, we were producing an ungodly amount of data per second, and we needed to find a way to try to process it and analyze it and extract meaningful intelligence from it, i.e. the identification of what the sound is. So it was a computational engine for classification of signal, all right? Digital signal. Now we've done that in firmware, we've done that at the chip level, we've gone small, we've gone big. It doesn't really matter, but that's where we stumbled on the work that IBM had done. So one thing I do is I partner. So instead of reinventing the wheel, I called IBM, and it took me 3 years, and finally we licensed the technology from them. We were the first company in the world to do so on December 21, 2009. Not bad for a little company out of Missoula, Montana. And I convinced them that we were going to do great things with it, and we have. We've set world records, we've done all this amazing stuff. Most people have no idea what I talk about when I talk about it, but it was a velocity problem. We've got X amount of channels producing X amount of data, it's coming really fast, and we need to analyze it there and now before it goes anywhere. I need to tell you with some assurance if it's a bad guy or if it's a good guy. Because if you make the wrong decision or the wrong classification, bad things happen. And that's a hard problem, but we partnered. I'm a big fan of integrating innovative technology from lots of different places. I don't necessarily have to invent everything. I'm not the mad scientist in my office inventing stuff. I grab it and take it and get it from wherever I can. I license it from the university, or I don't. I license it from the federal government. I license it from private sector businesses. I just got a license agreement today from Sarnoff Corporation. I was on the phone this morning with SAIC. You know, the world is global and it's happening. So, so you got volume, velocity, variety, which are the 3 fundamental dimensions of big data. That was brought up by Gartner. That's not a new thing. And then some of us have added new dimensions like veracity. Is the data truthful? What's the metadata? What's the provenance? Is it accurate? A lot of the world you're dealing with fuzzy data. It's incomplete data. It's inconsistent. It's dirty. It is, you know, you don't know if it's true or not. So a lot of us are dealing with veracity, validity, which is a logical structure construct. So you can do 3 Vs, 4 Vs, 5 Vs, 6 Vs, whatever. Secondly, it seems that a lot of commentators that I talk to or talk with or talk to, or I do these endless webinars all the time about this topic based on limited experience in the space, is that many of us are trying, many companies, many organizations, whether you're in healthcare and you're trying to do a better job of predicting when the baby's going to go into an intensive care crash, I could talk to you all night about your combination, or you're trying to do a better job classifying sound coming from a series of microphones buried in the ground, or we're trying to do a better job understanding and modeling how a farmer's going to do a better job predicting drought and the impact on his bottom line, or yada yada. I could go around the room. We could talk about the implications. Everybody wants to extract more meaningful intelligence from their data. So to do that, we have to go from this data mart, or this data thing, which is relatively meaningless. We have to move it into an information category where it's manageable, whether it's in real time or non-real time, right? It's either in motion or at rest. And we have to move it up into that level of understanding where individuals, people, are interacting with systems so they can extract insight. Now this is cognitive theory 101. One of the benefits of being a philosophy undergrad is I got to study how people understand and how they know and what cognitive theory means, and look at it for 2,000 years. By the way, we haven't reinvented the wheel on how we look at information in the last 10 days. So at the end of the day, that's about getting to insight. So you have a lot of people throwing around the word insight, and they have no idea what it means philosophically, metaphysically, or even physiologically. But at the end of the day, it's about extracting intelligence from your experience. And therefore, we get into visualization, we get into graphical user interface, we get into how we know. So understanding, understanding, knowing, knowing. And there's a great book on that written by a guy named Father Bernard Lonergan, S.J., called Insight. And if you want to know everything about how we know and what we know and how we do that and the metaphysics of knowing, the epistemology and the ontology, study that book. I did for 3 years. And all that is benefiting me now because we've got to move from information, from data to information, from information to patterns of experience, and from patterns of experience, we move into insight. And that's what we're trying to do at the speed of light right now at one of our companies, and then we built a new company on that. So it's really fun and exciting. So you've got 3 V's, 4 V's, 5 V's, you've got some basic characteristics. And beyond those dimensions, I think we're really trying to do more with what we have. We're trying to figure out how, in many ways, we're going to understand how we leverage this phenomena. So you'll hear a lot of people talk about synthetic analytics or perpetual analytics right now. I've coined the frame synthetic analytics or analytics as a service. A lot of other smarter people are talking about perpetual analytics. In many ways, I'll ask a question here. What's the one way we try to look into the future and understand what's going to happen tomorrow? Can anybody tell me?
Looking into the past.
Looking into the past. Okay, very good answer. Who else knows how we do that?
Model it.
Model it. Great. Okay, so we use models to help us understand what the future is going to be, and we deal in what? Probability? Right? Who's taking a statistics class in here? Okay, good, great, perfect, thank God. So at the end of, and I'm not a big statistician, and I don't pretend to be, but at the end of the day, we really rely on our models and our calibration of our models to help us understand the future, and we populate that with historical information. The more we know about the past, theoretically, the more we can know about the future, because we can model certain trends and we can learn certain trend lines. What's really exciting right now about big data analytics and big data architecture is the ability to take observations of phenomena that are occurring in real time, a stock market transaction, a weather observation, a temperature observation, a cattle population, a crop price, the carbon in the soil, the amount of photosynthesis occurring, 18 different indices coming from the baby in the intensive care, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and basically feed that into our model so we create a perpetual analytical loop. So I don't have my model over here that's based on training data set that's outdated and outmoded. And my current observations over here that is helping us try to understand where that wildland fire is going to go. We can take the current observations and feed them into the model and do a better job of projecting into the future. Current observation feeds historical model, model feeds projection, and if you do that fast enough, you do it more quickly enough, you can get into some very, very accurate forecasting, or the whole idea of analytics and predictive analytics. I don't really use the word prediction very much, but I definitely talk about modeling and forecasting, because all of my clients want to know, they want to know when the bad guy is going to do something. They want to know when the crop's going to fail. They want to know where the fire is going to go. They want a 20-minute advantage that you can intervene with the baby and before the baby crashes in neonatal intensive and care. They want to bring all this noise, and they want to eliminate the noise. They want to bring it in We don't want to throw it away anymore. We want to look at those outliers. We want to look at those stochastic outliers. We want to look at those anomalies. We want to look at those things like Nate Silver talks about. Read Nate Silver's book right now. It's a great book. Anyway, he's the guy that forecasted the election 4 years ago and did a good job. He was 98.9% right based on data. We want to bring those indices together. We want to model that, and we want to do a better job of understanding our future. Because the game is so tight right now, whether I'm micro trading or I'm designing a new chemical or I'm going to simulate how hurricane impacts, you know, the Western economy or the Eastern economy, you've got to do a better job of peering in 5 minutes, 5 seconds, 5 days into the future. And so where we're driven is to harness the power of big data to give us a better shot at that across a variety of industries. I'll give you another example. Can anybody name for me the 3 largest oil and gas exploration firms in the world? No. No, the 3 big exploratory oil and gas firms in the world. Well, there's one, Baker Hughes, another one called Schlumberger, and the third called Vice President used to work for him? Halliburton. Okay. They all have big offices in Houston. Let me give you an example of big data. Halliburton has 10,343 wells in the state of Colorado, and they're doing fracking. Each one of those wells produces apparently somewhere between 1 and 2 terabytes of data a day. And that's some information based on sensors that they're putting down hole, trying to understand where those resources are. Add up 10,000 times 2 terabytes a day. Just think about the logistics of getting that data back to some compute center where you auto-magically process it all. So one of the challenges is theoretically, maybe, possibly, is how you could create a compute device that would be able to keep up with those data rates, pull that information together, do the 3D seismic modeling, understand the acoustic signatures, and pull out that information. Because how does Halliburton get paid? They get paid when they produce what? Oil. No. A what? A finding, a report. Because who's buying it? This is get to know your customer, get to know them. I didn't know any of this crap 5 months ago, but I know now. At the end of the day, exactly. So if they can shrink that report cycle from 3 months to 3 hours, 3 days, and create it as a service, so you have sensors as a service, downhole, computationally churning all this, you can actually improve their cash flow cycle, get their billing cycle up, and they love it. And they're in a hyper-competitive industry. Those are the kind of things that are driving this phenomena, this part buzzy, part real thing that many of us are calling big data. So I could go on for a long time. I'll conclude here just on a couple points that are practical or that are real, I think. So I'm passionate about this, yes. I have gone into the K-12 community in Missoula. I've assisted Joe and others in trying to help at the university. I've created some scholarship programs here and there. But the University of Montana is sitting on a gold mine right now of opportunity to be an international leader in big data analytics. I'm convinced of it for a number of reasons. A, the University of Montana is not afraid of understanding information and producing data and sifting through data to do amazing things. One reason is we have a great tradition of being an international leader in geographic information systems, because we understood that things needed to be built a long time ago to clean up what? The Clark Fork River Superfund site. That money came from Exxon into the University of Montana over 30 years ago, and that funded a number of labs and funded guys like me to learn about the science. So anyway, we've got a lot of companies in Montana, and Missoula in particular, that understand information science, information theory, and how to get, the basic dimensions of big data. Number two, I worked hard to get IBM to partner with the University of Montana. We've got a class that's being taught right now in the School of Business, which is an interdisciplinary class that has computer science students, has math students, and has business students in it. Very similar to what you're trying to do and what you were trying to do with this club. I was very excited. It's entrepreneurial, it's interdisciplinary, it's team-based, and it's happening. Interestingly enough, those in that class are the common building blocks of what I would consider the fundamentals of big data analytics, and that is the following. You have people in there who can develop and support the fundamental mathematical expression of an algorithm. I don't care if the algorithm is super easy or if it's hyper complicated. At the end of the day, whether there's a spatial temporal dimension of that algorithm, you have people in there that know what that is and they can construct that mathematically. That's great. That's a very good place to start. Because what people want today are mathematicians. They're hiring mathematicians, as many as they can get their hands on. Because it's a game about who has the best algorithm. Okay? Number two, in there are people who understand how to reduce that algorithm to fundamental code. I don't care if it's C, C++, C#, C this, C that, .NET this, Java that. It doesn't matter. Or even new languages that are being developed. You've got to translate that into compute language for a computer so an operating system can run on it. So you've got that dimension. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, possibly, is you have people that are business students, masters, finance, accounting, I don't care, information systems, who are worrying about how to apply it to solve problems. How we're going to turn that into a model. What is the business proposition? What are people willing to pay? Should I go and look at this in terms of sorting through 85 billion legal documents in LexisNexis, which is a nightmare, by the way? Guess who are paying for big data solutions? Am I going to tackle the telecommunications industry? Am I going to look at agricultural reform and helping ranchers do a better job predicting what's going on? Am I going to look at this? I mean, pick an industry, I'll show you. You got to put it into a business plan. So the vision of that class, which is being taught by Eric Tangendahl, and I can give you all that, and there's going to be offered next semester, and it's the only one of its kind in the world, first in the world. Okay, I don't like to be 18th or 55th. I like to be first. Montana's got to be first, you know, and stuff. Missoula can lead the way. It's all about attitude. A first in the world of its kind is, and we're going to offer it again in the spring, is we need people involved in that. We need people. You don't have to take the class, but I want momentum around it. Because ultimately, my vision, which takes glacial periods of time around here, is I want to create a center of excellence for big data analytics. I want it to be an interdisciplinary program. I want students from all departments to be able to participate. I want them to learn what it's like before you go work for a company, what it's like to be thinking this way. Because when you come out, not just working or hiring possibly for the firms I'm involved with, but all the opportunities that will be available to you if you can get a toehold in this kind of space. So I've been personally trying to create a cradle-to-grave program from kindergarten to 12th. I'm doing it in high school at Sentinel now. The kids are loving it. They're doing great work. I argue with pundits online, on LinkedIn, and these blogs and all this crap I do, saying, you can't do big data in high schools. I'm like, what are you talking about? What happened to physics? What happened to math? What happened to chemistry? I mean, what happened to science, technology, engineering, arts, and math? STEAM education, not STEM education. So I'm in the trenches. I'm in the schools. We've got scholarships going over there. We get them into University of Montana. We reward the best and brightest there. We reward excellence. We raise the bar. I'm not sitting around trying to lower the bar. I'm not a lowest common denominator guy. Raise the bar, and then ultimately get these graduates to be thinking critically, expose your communication skills, and ultimately have that fundamental building block. So there's a toehold. That's all I'm saying. But I'll tell you what, if students don't drive it, it's not going to happen at U of M. So find out about it. Reach me. Reach this club. I can send you stuff. It took 2 years to get that going, and I do not want to stop, because it's not just ultimately beneficial for my company. A lot of people say, oh, you're no. Ultimately, I'm trying to raise the water level here, right? Because what happens if the water level goes up?
All boats rise. All
boats rise. I mean, it's like the most basic business theory, and that's why I supported economic development and supported those things. So that's a very, very quick overview of what is really a 2 to 3 hour lecture on big data analytics. And sometimes I go way too far into the weeds on that. Sometimes I don't do enough. I don't know if I've even begun to satisfy the needs of people interested in this space. But I didn't start off being a big data scientist. I started off as a GIS guy studying historical landscapes. And I will say this, the University of Montana was unique and had foresight to support an interdisciplinary program very early, one of maybe 10, 20 institutions in the country. And I think it was smart. It doesn't mean everybody has to be an interdisciplinary major or undergrad or what, I don't care. But definitely start thinking about how you're working together in different fields. Be trained, because it's a hyper-competitive world. I shared today with MSNBC that they're like, oh, how are you doing all this stuff? And I'm like, well, we're working hard, we're doing this, we're doing that. And I said, but at the end of the day, part of it is we don't know when to stop. We have a vision, we keep going, we try, you know, you win some and you lose some. That's the bottom line. So I've now babbled on for way too long again, I'm sorry.
I think, though, that
Go ahead,
the points
sorry.
that you've touched on in
Yeah.
these last few minutes,
Yeah.
I think that especially the computer science people in the room and the folks who were really attracted to big data, we're really glad to hear you talk about that. So thank you for
Yeah.
relevant babbling.
Well, I can stay later. Well, here's the thing, I brought a book for you guys. So, yeah, it's, yeah, I wanted to get something going. So 3 of my friends helped write this. These are all IBMers. This is a good primer for a lot of stuff going on in the space. It is relatively biased towards a lot of IBM stuff, but at the other hand, it's there. So I wanted to present this to your entrepreneur club.
Thank you.
You bet. You bet.